Alway's Mine by SamadiW. Chapter 5. Hermione stirred. Fuck. She felt like hell. Her head pounded unpleasantly, and her mouth felt like something had died inside. Opening her eyes slowly, they adjusted to the darkness. Nursing her throbbing headache, she looked around in alarm. This was definitely not her room. Where was she? It did look somewhat familiar. Looking down, she ran her fingers along the material. The dress was gone, replaced with a red silk top and matching shorts. What was going on? Oh, Merlin, what happened to her? Hermione looked around the room wildly, trying to figure it out. She couldn't remember much. A small groan distracted her. Moving her gaze to the sleeping man beside her, she let out a small scream. Trying to cover his head with a pillow to block out the hysterical woman, his patience snapped, and he asked, irritated, "Granger, why are you being loud?" Her eyes bugged out in shock at the voice. Looking over him grudgingly, she took in the small details. His body was bare, the bottom half covered by black sheets. Oh, please be wearing underpants or something. Malfoy turned red and started to stutter. Obviously, she would not shut up and let him sleep in peace. What? Draco hissed, his annoyance evident. Why am I in your bed? Hermione asked, her voice cracking with uncertainty. He smirked into his pillow and hoisted himself up into a sitting position. This was that opportune moment. He saw the muscles ripple as he crawled towards her. Reaching over, he tried to pull her to him. Hermione quickly jumped off the bed, pointed a shaky finger at him, and pleaded, "Please tell me what happened." He gazed at her in fake adoration. "We both had a bit too much to drink last night, and we entered the dorm. You kissed me." Her eyes widened in horror. No bloody way. She wouldn't have, would she? Draco ignored her and continued. "Who am I to refuse a beautiful and willing girl?" Quickly closing the distance between them, he tenderly ran a finger down her cheek. "You were amazing, Granger." She stepped away from his touch, sat back and stared at the bed like it had done her a great injustice. "You mean we—" Draco closed the distance between them again. "Yes, we did, and I promise I was really gentle, Hermione." A hand went to her mouth. She covered it with her palm and gasped. What had she gone and done? The tears threatened to spill over. He ran out of the room before he could see her moment of weakness. Draco stood to the side and watched the prude run out, and the minute she was out of sight, he burst out laughing. That will teach a bloody Gryffindor princess to never fuck with a Slytherin. Grabbed a towel and went to the bathroom, whistling to himself. The hot water washed over him, relaxing him at once. Closing his eyes, Draco tried to relax, but thoughts of Hermione and her smooth skin invaded his mind. He was getting hard by the mere thought of her skin on his, the vivid picture of his mouth at the base of her neck, and her mouth closed around his cockhead. His eyes flew open. His breathing hastened, and his fingers closed around his throbbing dick. Hermione never made it to her room. Collapsed on the sofa with her head in her hands and pulled at her outfit. What happened? How could she have been so careless? The Malfoy took advantage of her. How could he? A mix of anger, hurt, and frustration boiled within her, threatening to spill over at any second. The first time was supposed to be special. She wanted to at least fucking remember it. Draco changed into a faded pair of jeans and a blue t-shirt and wondered what she was doing. She was probably racking her brain in her rooms, trying to psychoanalyze every detail. He was heading to the Southern Common Room to meet with Theo and Blaise. They were spending the day in Hogsmeade. And that's how he found her, huddled on the couch in the Common Room, hugging her knees to her chest, as sob after sob racked through her body. Draco watched the girl before him, and something within him broke. He hated to admit it, but Granger was half-decent and destructible. Seeing her cry made his heart ache and slammed against his ribcage. He always pictured her to be in control of her emotions. He cautiously approached the crying girl, looked up at him through tear-stained eyelashes. "Go away, Malfoy. Please leave me alone. I'm not in the mood to deal with your shit," he cried between sobs. Taking a deep breath, he rolled his eyes and mumbled, "Nothing happened." Hermione stared at him intently. "What did you say?" Draco crouched down to be at eye level with her. "For fuck's sake, Granger, nothing happened." She kept staring at him with her big brown eyes. He wished she would stop looking at him, but sucking it up, he continued. "I might be an ex-Death Eater and cursed asshole, but I've never harmed a woman. I can never do that." He hesitated before adding slowly, "Even to you." He was deadly serious. He never would or needed to take an unwilling woman to bed. They usually threw themselves at him. An unconscious woman wasn't appealing in the least to him. He wanted him to feel everything he would do and then have the favor returned. Took a deep breath and explained. "You had too much to drink. Well, you passed out. And that fucking moron of a boyfriend you have was nowhere to be found." He rolled his eyes. "I carried you to the door. If you don't believe me, ask St. Potter. He saw the whole thing." Draco glanced at the door and frowned. "I didn't know your bloody password, so it was either leave you in the common room or in my bed. Obviously, I chose the latter." There, he explained. If it wasn't good enough for her, then fuck it. She looked at him weakly, digesting all he said, and asked timidly, "My clothes?" He was annoyed by what she was insinuating. "I did not sodding touch you, Granger. I transfigured your dress into what you're wearing. End of story." She clutched the material of her top sadly. Did touching her repulse him that much? Draco did not bother mentioning that he had seen Weasley shit piss-faced off his mind and tongue-wrestling with Lavender Brown. The image disgusted him, and he made a face. Hermione looked at him with a faint smile. Her breathing seemed to be returning to normal. Draco sighed. "Look, Granger, I would never hurt you." He meant it. She was too fragile and breakable. She smiled weakly and replied, "I trust you, Draco." He did not know why he did what he did next. Maybe because she called him Draco. But she looked so broken, yet beautiful and appealing. Cupping her face gently, he used his thumb to brush away her tears. She leaned into his palm and closed her eyes in contentment. He kissed her then. Their first kiss. He had no idea how amazing she would feel. He initially thought she would push him away, but she didn't. He held on to him, moved her fingers into his hair, and molded her lips with his, kissing him back fervently. Pressing his body close to hers, he deepened the kiss. To her senses, every feeling exploded and consumed them. Fuck, she felt so good. It was a quick moment of bliss. As the truth began to sink in, the realization of their situation was such a bitch. Draco stopped abruptly and stared at Hermione. Her eyes sparkled with a burning fire. She was breathing hard. He'd never seen her look so damn sexy. He ached to take her in his arms again, but no, this was wrong. She was Weasley's girlfriend. Fuck Weasley. But no, she was Hermione fucking Granger. What the fuck was he thinking? He gave her one last pained look and bolted from the dorm. Hermione watched, horrified, as he left her, but she didn't dare utter a word. She ran her fingers along her lips. They were swollen with his kiss, which awakened a dangerous need in her. Her heart was beating so fast. She needed a shower to calm her down and collect her thoughts. Draco almost ran from the dorm to the dungeons, but did not get far. The need for her was overwhelming, was overpowering his senses and conscience. He growled, "Fuck!" and sprinted back to the dorm. Hermione had her hand on the doorknob to her room when the dorm door flung open. Draco walked towards her with purpose. Grabbing her delicate wrist, he pinned her against the wall and kissed her senselessly. Felt all the barriers, her reservation about Draco Malfoy, break away as she ran her fingers along his back into his hair and fisted it. Pressed flush against her with purpose, pulling her close to him. His insistent fingers brushed her skin, cupping her face and holding her in place. He ran his tongue along her lower lip and bit down gently, earning a soft moan from deep within her. Merlin, this man was sexy. He was everything she fantasized about. Draco backed her slowly towards her room. When her back hit the door, she muttered the password. The door swung open, and he deepened the kiss further. Her legs gave out, and they both fell onto the comfortable bed. She was so soft. He never felt smoother skin. He continued to kiss her passionately, pushing his tongue inside her small mouth, and hers eagerly rushed out to meet his. He was inexperienced, but eagerly she matched his movements. His firm hand stood under her top and brushed along the sides of her waist as he moved his hand upwards and cupped her breast. Merlin help him. Hermione placed her palm on his chest and gently pushed him back so she could sit up. He intensely watched her remove the top, revealing her perfect breasts. Draco bent his head to them and took an eager nipple in his mouth. Hermione pressed into him, and a small moan escaped her lips. "You're amazing, Granger," he muttered against her full breast while his tongue swirled around an erected nipple. "Please, Draco, use my name," he whispered breathlessly. He was losing all control with her and always prided himself on absolute control, but this was different. She was different. Hermione wanted to touch Draco like he was touching her, but she was nervous that she would do something wrong, and the need to feel him was overpowering her insecurities. Boldly snaking her hand down to his growing bulge, she cupped it over his trousers and rubbed gently over the materia. Fuck! That almost pushed him over the edge. Groaned and pushed into her hands as her fingers massaged him over the thick materia. Struggling out of his t-shirt, it lay discarded at the foot of the bed. Her wetness dampened her shorts and almost dripped down her sides. Draco suddenly desired to taste her, kissing past her breasts and down her flat stomach. He slowly removed her shorts and thong. He felt her looking at him curiously through hooded lids. Her innocence was such a turn-on. She wasn't shaven, and a patch of hair covered her mount, but it mattered little to him. Using his hands to spread her legs slightly, he ran his fingers along her thighs before replacing his fingers with his tongue. Hermione's breathing quickened in anticipation, but Draco reassured her after every kiss. "Relax, love. You're going to love this." He smiled at her and ran the tip of his tongue down her slit. "Oh, fuck!" she gasped out loud. Without giving her a moment's rest, he pushed his tongue within the soft pink folds and hungrily devoured her. Fingers tightened around his hair as he flicked her clit with his tongue, pushing and sucking at the swollen bud. An unfamiliar heat rose within her. "Oh!" Draco felt a sudden hotness. It was close, so close. An unusually wonderful sensation crept through her very body, kept climbing up her thighs and reached its highest point, until, oh God, pure ecstasy. "Draco!" she cried out and grabbed onto his head hard. Spilled right down to her toes, wave after wave of pulsating pleasure and release. She moaned aloud and pushed her hips forward and conned into his mouth. Didn't stop until she was completely spent. Watching her orgasm was the ultimate turner. Stroking himself with his free hand, he sported an impressive erection. It fucking dawned on him that Granger was a virgin. Broke away again, wiped his chin, and stared at her. She wished he would stop doing that. The conflict was so evident in his eyes. It was tearing him apart. He looked at her like a caged wolf ready to snap. Draco. He spoke softly, trying to reach for him. He was in another world where only she existed, just her and her intoxicating smell. He broke out of his trance and looked at her again, but couldn't speak or find the right words. I'm sorry, Draco muttered before hurriedly leaving once again. Hermione covered herself sadly with the bedspread and watched through the open door as he exited the dorm and did not return. She stood naked in the bathroom looking at herself in the mirror, lips swollen and intensely throbbing between her legs. Her eyes were filled with desire for none other than Draco Malfoy. He had pushed her over the edge and given her her first real orgasm. She groaned out loud in frustration as she stepped into the shower. She was Ron's girlfriend, and she almost ended up sleeping with another man, and not just any man. Draco bloody Malfoy. Fucking well done, Granger, she internally raged. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of Always Mine by SamadiW. If you'd like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.